Welcome everyone to Heavens Give Me Patience, Rabbi Yishmael, King Lear, and the Divine Tragedy, part of Elul Zman at Drisha. We have the pleasure of learning with Gilla Fine on this class, looking at what's the difference between the God of the Bible and the God of the Talmud? Who was the last man to see God? And how do we balance love and fear in our relationship with the divine? Exploring the omnipotence and vulnerability of God through the Talmudic text of Rabbi Yishmael and the story of King Lear. For those who have not had the pleasure of learning with Gila before, she is the author of The Mad Woman in the Attic, displayed prominently behind her, winner of the 74th National Jewish Book Award, as well as the Rabbi Sachs Book Prize. She is a lecturer of rabbinic literature, exploring the tales of the Talmud through philosophy, literary criticism, psychoanalysis, and pop culture. She is on the faculty at Shalem College, Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies, the Tikva Scholars Program, the Nachshon Project, and the London School of Jewish Studies. And we're very happy to have her here today. And with that, happy learning.
Thank you, Kayla. Hello, everyone. It is very lovely to be back with Darisha and see some familiar faces and faces of people I look forward to properly meeting. We are on the verge of the high holidays. And so I want to talk about the climax, the moment that this entire time span leads toward. Those 40 days between the beginning of Elul and Yom Kippur, the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and the 25 hours of Yom Kippur itself. All of this time leads toward this one climactic moment. The moment when, during temple times, the high priest would enter the Holy of Holies to encounter the divine. This is the holiest man in the holiest space at the holiest time, a true apex of holiness. And yet, when this incredibly holy moment is described in the Torah, it is disappointingly laconic and lackluster. And at this point, I'm going to share my screen, but before I do, can I have a volunteer reader, please? And I am going to ask you to please read source number 2 for us.
And he shall take a panful of glowing coals, scooped from the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of finely ground aromatic incense, and bring this behind the curtain. He shall put the incense on the fire before the Lord, so that the cloud from the incense screens the cover that is over the Ark of the Pact, lest he die.
Thank you. Lots of technical detail, very little pathos. And things don't get better when we read the equivalent description of this moment in the Mishnah. Ilana, would you continue to number 3, please?
He took the coal pan in his right hand and the ladle in his left hand. He walked in the sanctuary until he came between the 2 curtains dividing the holy from the Holy of Holies, a cubit between them. He walked between them until he reached the north. When he reached the north, he turned his face south and walked to his left with the curtain until he reached the ark. He placed the coal pan between the 2 poles, released the incense upon the coals, and the entire house was filled with smoke.
Thank you. This is almost like a Waze list of instructions of how to get to the ark. You basically walk north until you hit 2 curtains, then you make a left, then you reach your destination. There's nothing of the spiritual drama, of the rapture that we might expect from an encounter with the divine. Fortunately, where the Torah and the Mishnah fall short, the Talmud can always be relied on as a good source of drama, which is why I love it so much. One of the reasons I love it so much. And indeed, very early on in the very first tractate of Brachot, on the 7th page, you don't have to get too far in, we have the following, I think, remarkable story. This is going to be our main text in number 1. We've got it both in the original Hebrew and the English. You can follow along in the Hebrew. We'll dive in directly to the English. And Ilana, if I can abuse you again.
Okay. It was taught, Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha said, I once entered into the Holy of Holies to offer incense in the innermost part of the sanctuary, and I saw Akatriel Yah, God the Lord of hosts, seated upon a high and exalted throne. He said to me, Yishmael, my son, bless me. I said to him, may it be your will that your mercy suppress your anger and that your mercy prevail over your other attributes, and that you deal with your children with the attribute of mercy, and that you deal with them beyond the letter of the law. And he nodded his head to me.
Thank you. Now, if you're following along in the Hebrew and you, like me, were around in the 90s, you now have Avram Fried running through your head. Some people know what I'm talking about. If you don't, be thankful. It's a bit of an earworm of a song. What I want you to do is take the next 3 minutes, go over the story again, and note what strikes you as remarkable or worthy of question. And in 3 minutes' time, I'm going to ask you to voice your opinions about what stands out for you in this story. What strikes you about this story? Go. Ron, yes.
Everything.
Everything. Do you want to be a bit more? I agree, but do you want to
I'll tell you.
nick
Yes,
one
I'll
diamond
tell
for
you.
us?
One, that Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha sees God. He's not a prophet. When God, and even Moshe is not supposed to see God, right? And the God asking to be blessed by man is extraordinary. And then he nods his head at the end, meaning I think he puts his head down to be blessed. It's remarkable to me.
Fantastic. So you have a couple questions there. One, how is he seeing God? And I'm going to add to this Karen's fantastic point, which is God seems very embodied in this story.
Yes.
And he's not a prophet. And I'm going to add to this the comment made by Ilana that it sounds like Isaiah. And you're absolutely right, Ilana, and we'll talk about that. And what is God doing asking man to bless him? So, yes.
Rabbi Yishmael is a Kohen Gadol?
Who is Rabbi Yishmael? Good. We're going to talk about that. Go on.
You have a couple minutes and you go into the Holy of Holies. There's a bit of, what's the word? Not irony, but there's something from the beginning strange about the story. That the rabbis are telling the story about a rabbi in the Beis Hamikdash that hasn't been there for hundreds of years, but they call him rabbi.
Good, good. So the assumption is that he is a high priest. Why do I say that the assumption is that he's a high priest?
Because nobody else gets to go except one time a year.
The only person who ever gets to enter the Holy of Holies is the high priest, and only on Yom Kippur. However, he's called rabbi, and rabbis only really appear after the destruction of the temple. So what's that about? Very good.
And one other thing, which is, I think, even stranger, he has a personal name for God.
Yes, good. And I'm going to add to this Marcy's point. What is that personal name? What is Akatriel Yah, God the Lord of Hosts? That is a very unusual name that God here is given. I'm going to review some of the comments in the chat, and then I'm going to open the floor once again. Very good, Cynthia. God offers this prayer first, and we're going to discuss that. Very, very good. Someone's been doing her Daf Yomi. I would assume God has an attribute of Rachamim. Why does Rabbi Yishmael bless God with the attribute of mercy if we just assume that that is obviously God's attribute? How come he didn't die? I thought you can't see God and live. Good. Yishmael does not bless God, but makes a request. You guys are great. Irving, yes. This is not really, I mean, is it a blessing? It kind of sounds like a request when all is said and done. It's couched in the terms of a blessing, but honestly, when you break it down, he's really asking here for something. Laura doesn't say he's high priest. Very good. He names God. I don't see this as a blessing, more of a plea. Fantastic. In effect, acknowledges that God's mercy is not as strong as God's other attributes. Very good. And what is the letter of the law? Fantastic. You guys are amazing. And very good, the name of God. Okay, good, fantastic. Are there any other points before we proceed?
The very end of the story, he nods his head.
Yes.
It's a personal discussion. Before
Very
that, he spoke, and at the end, he just sort of nods his head.
Fantastic.
Really strange.
You've hit on all the points. It's going to be a tall order for me to try and answer all of the questions, but I'm going to make an attempt. And just to summarize, I'm not going to touch on all the questions that you mentioned, although I will attempt to answer them all. But the four main questions that stand out for me are the following. One, God in this story is described in shockingly human terms. He's described sitting on a throne, nodding his head. This is a tremendous personification of God. The fancy literary term for this is anthropomorphism. And scholars have claimed that this is the most anthropomorphic story in all of rabbinic literature. One. Two, this, as we have established, is Yom Kippur, the day we ask God for forgiveness. Why then is God appearing asking man for a blessing? Three, say God has actually asked man for a blessing. Why does man, Rabbi Yishmael in this case, respond with a blessing, which, as many of you have noted, is more of a thinly veiled, self-serving plea for forgiveness? And four, say that God, on Yom Kippur, assumes a human form, reveals himself to Rabbi Yishmael, asks for a blessing, receives this plea for forgiveness in return. Why does then God nod his head? I should say that in rabbinic literature, nodding one's head signifies acceptance and approval. So very many questions, very, very little time, and we're going to dive right in. And if you have learnt with me at any point before, you know that this is my golden rule. To read a story in the Talmud, any story in the Talmud, there are exactly two things that we need to do. Anyone want to really gratify me by telling me what they are? I know some of you know this.
Please zooming in and zooming out.
Very good. Zoom. Thank you, Laura. Zoom in and do a close reading of the text. Zoom out and look at the context. Ron, you had your hand?
That was what I was going to say.
Thank you, Ron, also for remembering something I said. And so let's take these one at a time, beginning with zooming out. I want to zoom out and look at the passage that frames our story, that occurs in the Talmud directly before our story, which was already mentioned, but let us just read it. Can I have another reader at this stage, please? Ron, thank you very much. Would you read number 4 for us?
What does God pray? Rab Zutra ben Tobi said in the name of Ra, may it be my will that my mercy suppresses my anger, and that my mercy prevail over my other attributes, and that I deal with my children in the attribute of mercy, and that I deal with them beyond the letter of the law.
Thank you. This occurs before our story. The Talmudic editors use this to frame our story. What can you tell me, about our story from the way the Talmudic editors choose to frame it?
Most notable, let me get my camera on. Here we go. Most notable to me is that it is God doing the praying, not Yishmael doing the asking, but in the exact same language.
Good. This is God doing the praying, and it seems that Rabbi Yishmael manages in his prayer to hit on the precise thing that God prays for himself, that God wants for himself, which might explain why God then nods his head, because yes, this is exactly what I want, thank you. Laura, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say it's clearly that God is, well, maybe not clearly, God is concerned that God's anger overwhelms God's mercy.
Good, very good.
It needs to be more merciful.
Very good. Judith, did you want to say something?
Well, when I put it on, it was obvious if this is a frame for the later part, we've already been introduced to the fact that this is something God wants for himself.
Very good. Very good.
And whereas we pray to God for things, the question here is, what does God pray?
Good.
My question would be, to whom does God pray? And is he, in a sense, praying to Rabbi Yishmael for the very things that he wants for himself, just as we do when we pray to God?
It doesn't seem that he's praying to Rabbi Yishmael in this part, in the intro. It seems in a way that he's kind of praying to himself. Actually, the verb used here, mitpalel, and this has been long noted, comes from the conjugation of that verb is hitpa'el, which means you are both the subject and the object of the action, and that's what we do when we pray. Ron, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, well, why does God have to pray? If God is powerful, why does he have to
Exactly right.
talk to himself? He just do it.
Well, that's really interesting, Ron. I prayed this morning that I would have a productive day. Why did I need to pray that? Like, I could just do the things that I needed to do. But you kind of want to set the intention and hope that you stick to it, because it's always easy to just know what you need to do. It's a lot harder to do it. All right, so that's the context. Let us now zoom in and do a second rereading of the text. And Ron, I'm going to abuse you further. We're going to reread number 1, but this time we're going to do it very slowly and take it apart bit by bit. So would you take it from the top of the English, please?
Yes, it was taught.
Thank you. I'm going to interrupt you all the time. It was taught, the opening word of our story, Tanya. What does that signify? Does anyone know?
It's a braita.
Very good. It's a braita. You're clearly Drisha students. It's a braita, meaning this is a Talmud quoting an earlier Tanaitic tradition. Continue, please, Ron.
Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha said.
Thank you. Here we are introduced to the narrator and the protagonist of the story, Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. And as several of you noted, who is this guy? Does anyone want to tell us who this person actually is? Any guesses? Have you come across him before?
Is he Elisha ben Abuya's son?
He's not connected to that Elisha, no.
Is he connected to Elisha, who is Elijah's assistant?
No, a lot later.
Is he not a descendant of a family of Kohanim?
Sorry, say that again, Jordan?
He's a descendant of a family of Kohanim.
Good. He's of priestly descent. You know who he was, Jordan?
I'm racking my Jewish history brain here. That's the fact that comes to mind now.
Okay, you're absolutely right.
Rabbi Akiva.
Sorry?
I remember, a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva.
Good. Fantastic. All right. So they're actually... Oh, and Rosa's weighed in, and she's absolutely correct. All right, so let's take this apart bit by bit. There are 2 hypotheses as to who this Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha is. The first is that this is Rabbi Yishmael, the noted Tanaite Rabbi Yishmael, the chavuta, the study partner of Rabbi Akiva, one of the greats of the early rabbis, who was in fact of priestly descent. What is the problem with this hypothesis?
It's off to the temple.
Thank you, Ilana. Yes. If Yishmael ben Elisha, as Jordan said, if Rabbi Yishmael is a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva, he would have been active mid-2nd century, well after the temple was destroyed in the year 70. And in fact, there is a tradition that Rabbi Yishmael was a young child when the temple was destroyed, and that he was taken captive to Rome and had to be redeemed back into Jewish hands. And I cannot teach that without thinking about our contemporary situation. And so if you allow me, I would like to dedicate our learning together to the swift and safe return of our hostages, please God. However, scholars who say, nonetheless, no, this is definitely Rabbi Yishmael, they say this is a clear case of Talmudic anachronism. We know the Talmud does this a lot. The rabbis are projecting one of their own back into temple times. That's one hypothesis. The second hypothesis, which seems a lot more credible, is that this is Yishmael ben Elisha, the final high priest to serve in the second temple before it was destroyed, who then gets very brutally killed by the Romans during the destruction, and in fact is one of the 10 martyrs. Ron, if I can ask you to please read number 5 for us.
Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha was one of the 10 martyrs executed by the Romans.
Thank you. And if this sounds at all familiar, it might be because of Ele Ezkera. Ele Ezkera is the haunting lament, which we recite on Musaf of Yom Kippur after we've gone through the high priest's temple service of Yom Kippur. We've gone through all of the descriptions of all of the sacrifices and the dipping and everything that the high priest does. We then move on to a very heartbreaking lament about the fate of the 10 martyrs and their gruesome death at the hands of the Romans. And this is the fate of Rabbi Yishmael, of Yishmael ben Elisha, as described in this lament. Would you continue to number 6, please, Ron?
And the wicked one commanded that they be slain with force and brutality. And the first 2 to be taken out were the great scholars of Israel, Rabbi Yishmael, the high priest, and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, prince of Israel. They hastened to spill his blood like a bullock offered up. And when his head was severed, Rabbi Yishmael seized it and wailed over him bitterly in a voice like a shofar. What has become of the tongue which so diligently taught fine words? How through our sins is it now licking the dust? He cried over him profusely, trembling. The wicked one's daughter rose at the sound of his weeping. She longed in her heart for his beautiful countenance and asked her father to let him live. The evil one refused to allow him this to be done. So she asked of him that his skin be flayed from his face, and he did so without delay. When they reached the place of tefillin, where the tefillin are laid, Rabbi Yishmael screamed out bitterly to the creator of his soul.
Thank you. So this, it always gets me. This is Yishmael ben Elisha. He is the last high priest to serve before the destruction, which suggests that what is described in our story is one of the final Yom Kippur services in the temple, maybe even the very last one. The final man-God encounter inside the Holy of Holies before the temple was destroyed. If you could please continue the reading of the story, the second line from the top.
I once entered into the Holy of Holies to offer incense in the innermost part of the sanctuary.
Thank you. Let's stop there. So the words Holy of Holies, Kodesh HaKodashim, appear in some of the manuscripts, not all of them, which is why if you look back at the Hebrew version, you won't find them in the printed Hebrew edition. But the word innermost, Lifnai ve'lifnim, appears in all the versions of this story. And Lifnai ve'lifnim is the rabbinic term for the Holy of Holies, which once again situates us inside the Holy of Holies, which establishes the time of the story as Yom Kippur and Yishmael ben Elisha as the high priest. Let's read on.
And I saw Aktiel Yah, God of the Lord of hosts.
Thank you. And I saw Akatriel Yah Hashem Tzevakot, God the Lord of hosts, a very, very strange name given here to God. If you've learned with me before, you might know the answer to this question. If we wanted to find out the meaning of Akatriel Yah, what would we do?
See if it's mentioned anywhere else.
Thank you, Sol. Absolutely right. We would go looking for other mentions of this name elsewhere in rabbinic literature. And if we were to do so, we would discover nothing.
Right.
This name appears nowhere else in rabbinic literature, making it a hapax legomenon. Use that phrase in conversation. Your friends will be impressed. Hapax legomenon, a word that appears only one time in a particular body of work. However, although Akatriel Yah appears nowhere else in rabbinic literature, it appears all over the place in the Heichalot literature. The Heichalot literature is a body of mystical works from late antiquity. It's kind of like Kabbalah before we had Kabbalah. And Akatriel Yah is used all over the place in this body of work, specifically in connection to a divine apparition, to people having a vision of God. Now I'm gonna actually scroll up so you can see the word in the Hebrew. Hold on, I'm gonna orient my one moment. Okay, it's on the third line. And looking at the Hebrew, what do you think it means?
Has something to do with crown, that God is the
Very
king.
good. Hi, Zoe. Yes,
Hi.
it is the crown of God. It is generally God appearing in all of his kingly glory. Ron, let's continue reading, please.
God, the Lord of hosts, seated upon a high and exalted throne.
Thank you. And so the idea of God appearing in his majestic glory continues here. He's not just wearing a crown, he's also seated on a high and exalted throne. In the Hebrew, kiseh, ram, venisa. Now this phrase, as opposed to akatrielia, appears all over rabbinic literature, but it is always a quote. Ilana, what is it a quote of?
From Yeshayahu, from
Very
Isaiah,
good.
right? Is his when he meets God
Fantastic.
for the first time.
Good. It is always a quote from Isaiah chapter 6, which is a very important chapter. This is Isaiah's consecration into prophecy. Isaiah receives this divine revelation. He accepts upon himself his prophetic duty, and then he is given a prophecy of doom by which God will banish the people and lay waste to the land. And I should say that scholars debate whether this prophecy is directed against the northern kingdom of Israel, which was in fact destroyed during Isaiah's lifetime, or the southern kingdom of Judea and the temple, which survives various threats during Isaiah's lifetime, but ultimately, as we know, is destroyed as well. And so what we're going to do next is we're going to read not the full chapter, but almost in its entirety. And as we read, I want you to look out for parallels between Isaiah 6 and our main story in number 1. Let's give poor Ron a break. Would anyone take up the reading for us, please?
I can read. It's Laura.
Laura, thank you very much. Please take it away with number 8.
In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw my Lord seated upon a high and exalted throne, and the skirts of his robe filled the sanctuary. Seraphs stood in attendance on him, and one would call to the other, Holy, 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 God the Lord of hosts. His presence fills all the earth. The doorposts would shake at the sound of the one who called, and the house filled with smoke. I cried, Woe is me! I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my own eyes have seen the King, God, the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphs flew over to me with a live coal, which he had taken from the altar with a pair of tongs. He touched it to my lips and declared, Now that this has touched your lips, your guilt shall depart, and your sin be purged away. And God said, Go say to that people, Hear indeed, but do not understand. See indeed, but do not grasp. Dull that people's mind, stop its ears, and seal its eyes, till towns lie waste without inhabitants and houses without people, and the ground lies waste and desolate. For God will banish the population, and deserted sites are many in the midst of the land.
Thank you. Yes, parallels between what we just read and our main story, I can think of several.
High and exalted throne.
Thank you. A high and exalted throne, same phrase exact. Jane?
Lord of hosts and a house filled with smoke.
Fantastic. Okay, those are already 3. Any others? Purification. Good, Marcy. Anything else? All right, so let's go down the list. 1. I saw my Lord. Isaiah, very much like Rabbi Yishmael, has a vision of the divine who takes on some sort of physical form. 2, as Jane pointed out, he is seated on a high and exalted throne. Exact same words. 3, the skirts of his robe filled the sanctuary. Isaiah's divine revelation, just like Rabbi Yishmael's, takes place in the temple. Sanctuary, heichal, is the very same word that the Mishnah uses to describe the high priest on Yom Kippur working in the temple. 4, holy, 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 God the Lord of hosts. So once again, the majestic name of God, God the Lord of hosts, and holy, 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 evoking the Holy of Holies. 5, the house being filled with smoke. So the divine revelation in Isaiah, just like the high priest's incense offering in the Talmud will fill the house with smoke. And finally, your guilt shall depart and your sin will be purged away. The divine encounter, just like the high priest's Yom Kippur temple service, carries with it a potential for atonement. So we see how the rabbinic description of the high priest's Yom Kippur service, whether it is the halachic description in the Mishnah, which we read in number 3, or the Agadic description in the Talmud, which we read in number 1, are both deeply influenced by this chapter in Isaiah 6. However, in our story, the man-God encounter is not accompanied by an act of atonement, although it is in fact Yom Kippur. There is no entourage of angels. There's not even a prophecy of doom, and we may well expect a prophecy of doom because if Isaiah 6 happens before the destruction of the first temple, our story occurs directly before the destruction of the second temple. Instead of all that, what we have simply is God saying, Yishmael, my son, bless me. And this is the part of the story I never understood. This is the part that bothered me for years. Until I went to university to study literature. And in my intro to Shakespeare class, I read, amongst others, King Lear, one of Shakespeare's greatest tragedies. And King Lear blew the story wide open for me. So who would like to play King Lear? Guys, it's your chance to read Shakespeare. Are we going to give it to Ron again? Go for it, Ron. This is number 9. We're going to begin with the first monologue.
With meantime?
Yep.
Meantime, we shall express our darker purpose. Give me the map there. Know we have divided in 3 our kingdom. 'Tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age, conferring them on younger strengths, while we unburthened crawl toward death. Tell me, my daughters, since now we will divest us both of rule, interest of territory, cares of state, which of you shall we say doth love us most? Come not
Thank you. Let's stop there. The tragedy of King Lear is that he is King Lear, a mighty and terrifying king, angry and vengeful and jealous. So fearsome is King Lear, he can never be truly sure of being really loved. And King Lear is desperate to be loved. And so at the outset of the play, Lear, who is now old, decides to step down. He gives up his crown, he divides his kingdom amongst his 3 daughters, and all he wants is an expression of love in return. Which of you shall we say doth love us most? Now the first 2 daughters, Goneril and Regan, launch into these very long and somewhat disingenuous monologues describing their absolute boundless love for their father, and each one of them is given a portion of the kingdom in return. And then Cordelia, the youngest and the most beloved, answers more truthfully. She says, I love your majesty according to my bond, no more, no less. And yet this honesty enrages Lear, who disinherits Cordelia and banishes her from the kingdom. Ron, would you read the second monologue, please?
Come not between the dragon and his wrath. I loved her most and thought to set my rest on her kind nursery. Hence and avoid my sight. So be my grave, my peace, as here I give, is her father's heart from her. Ourself by monthly course, with reservation of 100 nights, by you to be sustained shall our abode make with you by due terms. Only we shall still retain the name and all the additions to a king.
Thank you. Now the rest of the play devolves predictably into tragedy as Lear, who is no longer king, but he still holds on to his entourage of 100 knights, falls out with his other 2 daughters, whom he accuses of not loving him enough. Lear can't stop inspiring fear, ranting and cursing and threatening vengeance, and so still he can never be sure of being truly loved. Let's do one last monologue, please. Ron?
You heavens, give me that patience I need. Do you see me here, you gods? A poor old man, as full of grief as age, wretched in both. If it be you that stirs these daughters' hearts against their father, fool me not so much to bear it tamely. Touch me with noble anger, and let not women's weapons water drops stain my man's cheeks. No, you unnatural hags, I will have such revenges on you both that all the world shall. I will do such things. What they are yet I know not, but they shall be the terrors of the earth. Think I'll weep? No, I'll not weep. I have full cause of weeping, but this heart shall break into 100,000 flaws, O ere I'll weep. O fool, I shall go mad.
Thank you, Ron. Bravo. The great tragedy of King Lear is that he can't stop being King Lear. He may be aging and vulnerable. He may have given up his crown, but he still remains as angry and as terrifying a tyrant as ever, exactly as Eve writes. The more angrily Lear chases love, the more he pushes that love away, until he dies betrayed and brokenhearted. King Lear, in this respect, is not unlike the God of the Bible. The God described as angry and vengeful and jealous. The God who inspires profound fear and who wants so badly to be loved. Can I have another reader, please? We're not going to read all of these, but we're going to read some. Volunteer reader, please.
Sadly.
Thank you, Jordan. Would you take it from the top of number 10?
Certainly. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. What does the Lord your God ask of you but to love him? Love the Lord your God. So, if you faithfully obey the commands I'm giving you today, to love the Lord your God and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, if you carefully observe all these commands I'm giving you to follow, to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him.
Thank you. We'll stop there. You get the point. What we have here are 10 commandments to love God from just 6 chapters in Deuteronomy. There are dozens more scattered all over the Bible. We Jews made a terrible mistake in the Middle Ages for which we must blame Maimonides. We imbibed into a religion a completely foreign idea of God, a Greek idea of God. The God Aristotle calls the immovable mover, a God who has no needs or wants or desires. But that is not, nor has it ever been, the Jewish God. The Jewish God is a God who profoundly needs, who desperately desires, and who desires nothing more than the love of man. But the tragedy of the God of the Bible is that he is also a mighty and terrifying king. A king who punishes and exacts revenge, who banishes the people and lays waste to the land. A king who knows he is so feared, he can never be truly sure of being loved. And so on the eve of the destruction of the Second Temple, in what may well be his final encounter with man inside the Holy of Holies, God assumes human form and reveals himself to Rabbi Yishmael. He still wears his crown. He's still seated on a high and exalted throne. But God is no longer the frightening, foreboding God of the Bible. God is now the God of the Talmud, aging and vulnerable, and still desperate to be loved. Yishmael, my son, bless me. There is so much vulnerability. There is so much meekness in that request. And Rabbi Yishmael hears, and Rabbi Yishmael understands. And Rabbi Yishmael responds to everything God has not said. May it be your mercy, may it be your will that your mercy suppress your anger, and that your mercy prevail over your other attributes, and that you deal with your children with the attribute of mercy. May you overcome your anger, says Rabbi Yishmael to God, so that you will be less feared. And may you be less feared, so that you can feel truly loved. And God, moved beyond words as I read it, nods his head. There's a wonderful contemporary Israeli play. I don't know if it's ever made it to any theatre close to you, but if it ever does, you really must go and see it. It's called Oh God. It's a two-person play. There's Ella, the psychotherapist, and there is a man all in black with a deep bass voice who comes to see her because he's depressed and he wants to end it all. And about 4 minutes into the play, you realize that this man is God. And so who would like to take the role of Ella, the psychotherapist, who's not yet read or has read and would read again?
Sure.
Sol, thank you. Number 12.
Number 12. Why did you come to me? There are so many other therapists. I'm not, this isn't, I just don't, this, look for one thing. You never had a mother? Who will we blame it on? No, you don't scare me. Maybe a little. Look, let's start. We'll try. We'll see how it goes. Okay. What's your first memory? The earth was formless and void. Try and recapture that. We have the formlessness and the void, and the darkness on the face of the deep. How does that make you feel? Nothing? You didn't feel at all lonely? Who did you play with? The formlessness and the void? No father, no mother, no brother, no sister, no friend? And then what? You just decided to create the world? You know what? You really do need help. I think you have a serious anger management problem. You've gotten used to solving every problem with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. You threaten, get angry, lose your temper, inflict punishment, and then regret it. You, sir, are a menace to society. This is your way with everyone you love, and especially with those you love most. What? What are you going to do? Turn me into a pillar of salt? Rain, fire, and brimstone down on me? I'm not scared. Okay, I'm not afraid of you. Kill me now, see if I care. I don't give a damn for this life. Go on, destroy, devastate, demolish. You know, now that I think of it, you've never actually, in all the years you've existed, no one has ever held you, given you a hug. Get up. Come on. Is it okay if I hug you? Relax. Close your eyes.
Thank you. Bravo. We are about to enter the high holy days, our own holy of holies, our personal encounter with the divine. We tend to think of ourselves as terribly vulnerable during this time and entirely dependent on God's judgment of us. We say after Vidui on Yom Kippur, this is number 11, Ma'anu mechayenu machasdenu matzit kotenu. What are we? What is our life? What is our kindness, our righteousness? We think ourselves insignificant and helpless and small. But what the rabbis are telling us in this story is that it's the other way around. It is God who is vulnerable to us and entirely dependent on the love we have for him. What are we? We are sons and daughters of God, adult children of an aging parent. What is our life? Our life is that which has the power to cause God great pleasure or great pain. What is our kindness, our righteousness? Our kindness and our righteousness is in our ability to make God feel truly loved. Our God is vulnerable. He is desperate for our love and susceptible to our hurt. And on these days, we ask forgiveness for having hurt him, for having left him to his loneliness. The God of the Talmud, the God after the destruction, our God today is an aging parent, and we are his adult children. Yishmael, my son, bless me. On these high holy days, may we be able to hear God's plea, and may we find it within ourselves to respond. Shana Tova, K'tiva v'chatima Tova.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we have some time if people have any burning questions or comments. I'm just going to put my email address in the chat box, so if anybody wants to follow up, if I've not touched on anything that seems critical, you are very welcome to email me. Those of you who have know that I always do respond.
And if you lose Gilla's email, you can also reach out to Drisha, and I will happily relay the message.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I had another one.
Yeah, Eve.
What I'm interested in this idea of God as an aging parent.
Yes.
That seems to sound weakened, in need of care, without the power. Is it his as agency, no longer has activity?
So
Is retired essentially?
God is described quite consistently in rabbinic literature as somehow weakened after the destruction. We have this idea come up again and again. The idea is that the destruction somehow really disempowered God or God's presence here on earth. And obviously this is all anthropomorphic. Obviously this is all us taking human terms to describe God. What I think is going on here is not so much that God changes between Bible to Talmud, but rather that our perception of God changes. So God of the Bible is very much the way we would see God as a young child, right? Your parent is all powerful and can do no wrong and is also rather terrifying. And, you're entirely dependent on that parent. And as we move from Bible to Talmud, God becomes, sorry, Jane, I can't do that right now, but do email me and I'm very happy to respond. God becomes, in our eyes, an aging parent, in that as you grow up, you realize that your parent isn't all powerful and that the parent might need you every bit as much as you need them. And again, it's all about our experience of God. What I think is happening here is kind of an equalizing of the relationship. It's not you entirely dependent on God. It's not one directional. Now it becomes bilateral. Now it's you are at least 50% responsible for this relationship. And whether or not this is philosophically true, there's great temptation to buy into Aristotle's view of God because it makes philosophical sense. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't make religious sense. It's a lot harder to pray to an Aristotelian God. It's much easier to pray to the God of the Bible, and I would say it's easiest and probably healthiest to pray to the God of the Talmud, where you know that there is something that you can give God as well.
Thank you. Actually, I think you're.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think your Ella, your psychoanalyst, has something to say about destruction.
Sorry, Eve, you've frozen up on us.
I actually have a question, and I'll defer as soon as she can get back. You mentioned that God is in Devarim, especially we have all these commandments to love God, but
yes.
But certainly there are many times that we're asked to fear God. And, like in the Akedah, God says, now I know you're Yireh Elohim. There's so much about fearing God.
Oh, sorry, you did not read my emailer this week because I have a reading of that Yireh Elohim there, which kind of ties into what I've just been saying.
Okay, then I will read it.
But yeah, no, it's absolutely true that love and fear is meant to be balanced. Right. But I feel like, again, following Maimonides' Aristotelian turn in the Middle Ages, we feel the fear a lot more acutely than we feel the love. And part of this year is about trying to bring love back.
Right. In a way, it's similar because I've been learning a lot from different people about Sefer Yonah, about the necessity to balance din and rachamim.
Yeah,
the verb cannot be ruled by God exclusively by din, because then we'd all be punished constantly. And it can't be ruled exclusively by rachamim, because then we'd be off the hook for everything that we do wrong. And it's the tricky part is when does God, find the din more compelling and necessary, and when does he find the rachamim to predominate?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think, again, it speaks more to our experience of God rather than God's objective self. Eve, are you back again?
Oh, I was just thinking about your psychoanalyst, Ella, and how our maturing and God's aging are tied to destruction, and we had to go through this perhaps to get to a new relationship, a new understanding.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think turning into an adult is always involves a degree of loss, right? You lose a degree of innocence. The world becomes a far more complex, difficult place, and there is loss in that. But it's something you have to go through to arrive at something, I think, more real in the end of the day. I absolutely love Gail's comment about God's prayer to us. I think that's exactly right. All right, everyone. I'm sure you all have cooking and cleaning and things to do before the great day of judgment. Have a Shana Tova, Ktiva v'Chatima Tova, Besorot Tovot, please God.
Amen.
And I look forward to seeing you again at some point. Shana Tova.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gilla, for coming to teach here once again. It's always a pleasure. And I just want to highlight one more upcoming class as part of Drisha's El Zman. Next Sunday on September 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, so -4 GMT, is the 2025 Judith and Stanley Rudolph High Holiday Memorial Lecture, where this year we will be hearing from Rabbanit Shani Taragin on the topic of Revisiting 3 Weeks, Almonds, Eggs, and Goats. If you would like to sign up, the best way to do so is drisha.org/classes. And thank you all for making time. Take care.